Hi, this is Laura Lee Barron of the Lake Washington Education Association. This is part two of a verbal summary of the LOU for K-1 return to in-person instruction. If you have not watched part one, you may want to do that before we begin here on page 5, part 2 of the LOU. Part 2 directly addresses workload support and safety for in-person instructors. You can see in number 1 of section A that IA support will be provided for arrival and attestation, snack time, recess, student movement within the building, and student dismissal. In addition, classroom teachers will each receive 60 minutes per day of academic assistance via an IA. That may occur in one 60-hour lump or in a series of smaller sections of time, but every day of instruction, Monday through Friday, teachers should receive 60 minutes of IA assistance. If you don't receive that assistance, there is an opportunity for compensation. In section B, we talk about the assessments that we referred to in the part 1 of the video series. Specifically, FastBridge assessments are an area of concern. If you know that students will be leaving your roster because they'll be staying remote and you plan to teach in person, or for any other reason you know that this student will not be on your list, you're encouraged to do their assessments first. We understand that lists of new rosters need to be sent before you know who's leaving and who's staying, but if you can make a calculated guess, please try to do those students who will be leaving your roster first, and so the transition is smooth. In addition, this is a good time to remind you that MOY and EOY math assessments are optional this year. In part C, we talk about instructional materials. You get to keep all of your instructional materials. The schools are supposed to be ordering new materials. If your building principals refer to, there's no money for that, then you should contact your building rep in Lake Washington Education Association, as the district has assured us that they have everything necessary to return to in-person instruction. Materials are necessary. You should be able to get what you need to teach your class. In section D on recess, we just reiterate the normal practice that during the first 2 weeks, teachers will assist with supervision as kids learn the routines of recess and snack time and coming and going from school. Part 3 refers to staffing. We are agreeing to continue staff meetings and communication with the districts and the buildings. Specifically, meeting schedules can be reevaluated and adjusted once we get to in-person instruction and see how new routines are working. Unless there's an emergency, people should not be meeting in groups, and that remote instructors should be part of the discussions and need to be accommodated for. In other words, the meetings of staff should remain in a remote setting. We do not want staff to congregate either in person on campus, and that includes at lunchtime. You are discouraged from congregating as it could increase the spread of the COVID virus. Part 3, scheduling meetings, reminds principals that they should give 24-hour notice before scheduling a meeting. Part E talks about the LEAP schedule and that it needs to be accessible for all staff in a central location. Remember that central location might be online. As we move to part 5, this section, or part 4, this section is all about substitutes. The district has agreed to give paid training on safety and health to any sub who agrees to teach in person. In addition, the district is providing Microsoft Teams training for subs who would like to work in a remote setting, because we still need substitutes for remote instructors. Again, that pay is, or those days are compensated. In terms of compensation, the district has showed their value for substitute teachers by giving bonuses for those who commit to substituting in Lake Washington School District on a regular basis. In terms of emergency classroom coverage, remember we're trying to maintain cohorts and not mix adults with students or mixed students. The district should have an emergency substitute coverage plan. Part of that plan is that specialists who are not considered at risk and are able to return to in-person instruction may be asked to substitute once a week. At this point, no more than once a week because we want to maintain those cohorts. We understand and have had questions regarding specialists who don't live close to school. I would suggest that you discuss that with your principal and that you need a night before notice, because that's what teachers are asked to do as well, is to give notice so that you have time to get to school. Nobody is going to hold you accountable if you live an hour away and that's how long it takes you to get to the building. So let's treat each other with grace and be sure to talk to your administrators about that. Remember, K-1 begins February 4th. 2nd through 5th is calendared to return on February 18th. In the middle of that is winter break. We believe when 2nd and 3rd return that the specialist schedule will change, but that is yet to be negotiated. Part 4 is important on subs. It just talks about if you're a remote instructor and you're going to miss a day, like you have a doctor's appointment and you can't make your synchronous time, the district is allowing for asynchronous for one day. And hopefully it's not going to impact the school single cohort of students more than once per month. So if you're going to go to the doctor and you can't get a sub, it's okay to do asynchronous work. Moving on to part 5, job assignments, page 8. This talks about the voluntary and involuntary transfer process. As you may have heard, an LOU works in conjunction with the collective bargaining agreement. For this purpose, we have suspended or set aside the following language for the collective bargaining agreement in order to allow transfers. Transfers will be in the K-1 grade band 2, 3, and 4, 5. A high school history instructor, for example, is not going to be transferred to 4, 5 because we need more 4, 5 teachers. That is not agreed to. In part 5, section B, we specifically talk about safety net teachers. It's an understanding that approximately 30 of the safety net teachers will be transferred to K-1 classrooms, depending on need and the amount of students who will be returning to in-person instruction. These are the steps the district must take in order to transfer safety net teachers into the classroom. It talks about the volunteers, and then it talks about the collective bargaining agreement here. It talks about the pool of the safety net as established. The highlight here is that we're going to use program seniority. If you don't know your program seniority, you should talk to the chair of the safety net teachers, the district administrator in charge of safety net. Section C is talking specifically about the transfer process. This is going to be different for every single safety net instructor based on when you were hired and your program seniority. And so here are the steps when and if it becomes necessary to follow them for your position. I'm going to leave them for you to read and not go through each one. You can see there's references to what to do when there's a tie in seniority. Section D talks about employees at increased risk categories. The district requests that employees in these categories, as defined by the CDC, you might want to double check those links on our webpage because those definitions have changed of who's increased risk, that they identify themselves to the HR department as soon as possible. After accommodating staff at increased risk, the district will work to accommodate staff that fall into might be at increased risk. Please understand that accommodate does not guarantee remote instruction. Accommodations might be included but not limited to offering out of endorsement waivers, meaning you teach something different than you normally teach, remote work, limiting the amount of people you come in contact with, or other options. We just want you to understand that it does not guarantee a remote assignment. The district and the association recognize that there might be more people at increased risk than there are remote assignments, and therefore this is the steps to determine who gets first choice. It talks about transfers, it talks about certified in more than one area, it talks about risk level, it talks about people who do the same thing, who gets the remote position, and less senior staff may be assigned remote work in a secondary area or an in-area out of endorsements area. You might want to review that if you think you're going to fall into that category. Part 5, Section E, is training and planning for staff voluntarily or involuntarily transferred. So if you pick up a new class that you've never done before, they're going to allow time for training of new curriculum materials and also planning for your new students. When new students are brought into the building, they will receive training on health and safety processes before returning to a classroom. Part G is important as it might impact a lot of people. For any teacher who's asked to pack up or move classrooms, they will be provided 7.5 hours at the time card rate. If you think about the fact that we're hiring maybe 20 more kindergarten, first grade teachers, and that class sizes will be 15 when you're in person, then you can understand that people might need to give up classrooms for the remainder of the school year. Therefore, you would need to pack up your room, and that's where this comes into play, that you get 7.5 hours at the time card rate. This is the end of part 2 of our verbal summary of the LOU for K-1 in-person instruction. Please join us for part 3 after you've had a time to take a break. Thank you for your time. If you have questions, refer back to the Lake Washington Education Association website. Thank you.